Oasis was founded in 2005, and its initial mission was to provide safe drinking water to people irrespective of their sex, race, or religion. So we came about realizing that in many urban areas, people tend to have, in developing countries, people tend to have access to water because they have a lot more political influence in urban areas and because it's easier to provide for people. But in rural areas around the developing world, these people are often neglected. So our mission was we were going to try and provide water to these people who lived in rural areas, who didn't have that same access, that same voice, and weren't able to sort of lobby governments and organizations to get that human right, which was in 2010, safe water was declared a human right by the United Nations. So that was sort of how we originally began.
And obviously, you're a business, not a charity. So why should you be listened to at these talks?
Well, for us, we're demonstrating what the business world can do and should do in terms of adapting to climate change. Now, for us, climate change really affects our mission. Our mission, as I said, was to provide drinking water. Now, climate change, the melting of glaciers, the rising sea levels, how it's affecting surface water, how in areas sweet water is becoming brackish, it's becoming salty. That's affecting whether people are able to have safe drinking water. That's affecting their food security. It's affecting whether they can water their crops. So all these things are being affected by climate change. Now, for us as a business, we obviously are looking at things and saying, well, we want to make a profit at the end of the day, but we're looking at through a sort of a dual perspective of how can we make a difference while still, working as a business. It's difficult and it's complicated because we're not, as you say, we're not an NGO. We're not doing this as purely out of self-service, but we're doing a business within a social context. It's a social business. Our mission is to do something better and effective for these people, and that's what we're doing. That's why we have nearly 1,500 projects completed to date in Pakistan, which are providing water for over 6 million people. This is on the back of other projects done by failed projects, I must say, done by governments and NGOs in the country. So what we've demonstrated is that business can have a positive impact on changing people's lives and also changing how the world responds to climate change. And I can tell you actually some of the things we're doing in the climate change context. Last year we inaugurated our first ever completely solar-powered ultrafiltration plant. And this year we inaugurated our first ever completely solar-powered reverse osmosis desalination plant. We're now in the process of converting over 50% of all our projects onto solar power. And this is helping people in remote areas, in rural areas, off-grid areas, who previously didn't have any water, who didn't have electricity. Now these people have a safe supply of water, and they have it, in a country like Pakistan where you have 330 days of, solar power, sun every year. It's a reliable way for these people to have water whilst respecting the environment, whilst ensuring that, we're mitigating the effects of climate change on what we're doing and how we're operating.
Solar sounds like the way forward. What kind of barriers do you come up against in terms of government and other issues in building it? Because it sounds like the answer for a lot of countries.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems still with solar is its cost and its the space required. Now, if you're working in sort of remote areas, the space is sort of not necessarily a factor. For governments, the problem is new technologies. It's often very difficult for bureaucracies to adopt new technologies. Part of the struggle we had in the past was we were bringing in the newest technologies, 21st century technologies, in partnership with the likes of Dow, Grundfos, some of the world's biggest water technology companies. And there was a lot of pushback at first, and we had to sort of demonstrate small model projects and demonstrate to the bureaucracy that this would work, because their fear is that they may lose their job if something goes wrong, and they're used to the status quo, the old ways of sort of sand filtration, gravity filtration. But once we've demonstrated that this works, then they're a lot more receptive to it, and that's what we found in Pakistan, is that we demonstrated, as I said, both reverse osmosis and ultrafiltration, and we're now also doing a wastewater solar project. And on the back of that, the government has said, okay, yes, you've demonstrated successfully that solar works. We will now find the money to do this, because the options are, nothing in many areas, or use of fossil fuels. Now, in some countries, which are moving towards recognition of the fact that climate change is something that they have to tackle themselves, even as developing countries. They can't just rely on the developed countries to do it, because of the fact that they caused the problem. But developing countries now realizing they also have to step up, and Pakistan is realizing that. And so, in lots of our projects, the government has said, yes, solar is the way forward, and you've demonstrated it. So now these projects we're building are going to sort of all be solar. So we're very excited about that.
Just very quickly to conclude, how can what you do and water engineers help with the progress of these talks?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think what we're hoping at least to achieve by coming here and being at this event is demonstrate that technology, I think, for us is the way forwards. I think the solution to climate change, to a large part, is going to be about harnessing new technologies, as you say, solar, through using, for example, in my field, in water engineering, using membranes which use less energy to desalinate the water, to produce the water. Taking a different approach, not saying, okay, we have this clean water, we're going to pump it hundreds of miles and use huge amounts of energy to pump this water, which is very energy intensive. Instead, we're going to take a different approach, and we're going to demonstrate that technology works. Technology, for us, is really the way forwards, and it will make up a huge part of the world's solution to tackling climate change and really getting a handle on it in the future.